Comrades, viva! Comrades, viva! The awesome burden of moderating an afternoon session has fallen squarely on my shoulders. And and it's a technical conversation, and yet not that technical, because it's a very political conversation also. It sounds futuristic, but it's not. So today I'll be joined by a panel of wonderful, excellent people. First one, I'll be joined by Dr. Robert Mudhuri, who is an innovation and technology lawyer with deep expertise at the intersection of law and informatics. He holds an Erasmus Mundus PhD, which is very prestigious, in legal informatics, and has served as an innovation manager at Anjawala and Kana, where he led the development of cutting-edge legal solutions. He was also a senior researcher fellow at the Center for Intellectual Property and Information Technology, which is hosted at the Strathmore School of Law. He has contributed to pioneering research in technology, law, and policy. Passionate about leveraging legal informatics to transform legal practice, Dr. Mudhuri focuses on building effective technology-driven legal products and services that enhance access, efficiency, and innovation within the legal sector. Help me invite Dr. Mudhuri with applause. Joining us also in this panel is James Mojes. James is a dedicated advocate for ethical AI, digital rights, and the fair treatment of data workers. With experience in content moderation, he brings first-hand insight into the challenges faced by digital laborers in the global south. He has also served as a legal organizer at African Continent Moderators, where he champions transparency, accountability, and the protection of workers in the tech industry. Currently, JMO is pursuing certification in data protection to further empower content moderators and data workers to exercise their rights and demand greater responsibilities from big tech. Help me invite James. Finally on the panel, we have Marie Iradukunda, who is a research associate at the ILINA program. She holds an LLB from Strathmore Law School and an LLM from Harvard Law School, another prestigious Ivy League school. Her research explores the risks that artificial intelligence poses to African countries and communities, and the ways in which African governments can respond to these challenges. Help me invite Marie. Happy Katiba Day. Happy Katiba Day. For those that are not Kenyans, 15 years ago today, we promulgated the 2010 Constitution. So today we were reflecting somewhere else on the gains that we have made and maybe the clawbacks that we have had. So good afternoon once again, colleagues. Today we meet to discuss digital innovation, artificial intelligence, and the promotion of democracy in East Africa. At first glance, this might sound like purely a technical conversation, but at its core, it's a very political one. This is not a futuristic conversation. It's a conversation about the present, today. Digital innovation is not neutral. It is shaped by power, money, and control. Across East Africa, we've seen how social media platforms have been used to amplify citizen voices, mobilize protest, and push back against state overreach. At the same time, these very tools have been turned against the people through state surveillance, internet shutdowns, and weaponization of misinformation. And there's also another layer to it, the role of oligarchs and multinational companies and corporations that we cannot ignore. How global giant techs like Google, Meta, Microsoft, and Elon Musk's Starlink have become de facto arbiters of information and influence in the world and in our region. Who owns the data? Who sets their algorithms? Who decides what voices are amplified and what voices are silenced? These are questions not being answered in Nairobi, nor in Kampala, nor in Dar es Salaam. They are often being answered in Silicon Valley boardrooms shaped by billionaires whose primary motive is profit and not democracy. This poses a profound challenge of how do we ensure that the promise of digital tools and AI strengthens democracy in East Africa, rather than deepening the inequality or handing over sovereignty to foreign corporations. And that is why we are joined by this wonderful panel today. So, Dr. Mudhuri, to start us off, you've studied law, tech, and governance closely. Given the growing influence of corporations, the ones we've mentioned, what regulatory or policy tools could East Africa states use to prevent digital colonialism while still fostering innovation? Karibu sana Daktari, and also as you also give your remarks as you had prepared them, as you address that question. Karibu.
Good afternoon. I love that there's already energy in the room, which is usually difficult after lunch. So thank you very much for your presence, your observation, and more importantly, the work that you're all doing. I know one way or the other, everyone here cares about digital rights and the online space. So first, it's also to congratulate IFD on the lab. It's Oriental Lab, right? I definitely, I always challenge, and I think even the last meeting that you invited me, I want more empirical research. Maybe it's because I'm an academic. I want more tools. I want more presentations like this to be presenting research that's been done and tools that have been developed and vetted. And to the funders in the room, the decision makers in the room, that's what we want more of and less talking, for instance. So I'm really happy to hear of a lab that is looking to look at how do we apply digital innovation plus AI now to democracy. It's always interesting because when I get these topics from ICJ and the forum, they always make me think and think hard about this. And how I was thinking about it is, I like what Dr. Mukoya said about every right is claimed. Every statement you see in that constitution, 15 years ago, you can imagine, is claimed. And last year is a time when I think we fundamentally started testing to what extent do we actually have this as digital rights. So the right to assemble, the right to associate, the right to, what else? Freedom of media, the right to have privacy in an online space. What does that mean? On June 25th, and maybe before that, we started seeing what that means. And as he said, there is going to be the use of technology in a positive way, but also in a negative way. So how can we use these technologies to promote freedom of assembly, for instance? Online mobilization, online crowdsourcing. We saw how those two were used very effectively to mobilize, to crowdsource, to mobilize for demonstrations, for instance, and to test that right, but also to crowdsource for help afterwards. So people were able to crowdsource money to help those who were in hospital, were able to crowdsource other information that was needed to help those who were in need. For the freedom of association, what does the digital public square look like? You know, when you go to Europe, you see this public squares, and they're well maintained because from back in the ancient time, that's where people met to actually caucus and talk about these topics. We have our very own in Kamkunji, we have it in the gardens. What are the gardens called? Jivanji Gardens, right? Those are our public squares. How do they look like online? And so I think it's important to think about how we're doing online communities, forums, social media groups, etc. Now, after that, we also need freedom of access or freedom for information, transparency, government spending, parliamentary activity, simplifying access to these things is really important. Being able to do freedom of information requests, for instance. You remember, is it Tony Blair who said that allowing the passage of the Freedom of Information Act in the UK was one of his biggest catastrophes because it's the one thing that opened up public information. We have that here. It was actually a private member's bill. How many freedom of information requests do we do? How much of that do we even know exists, right? Freedom of the media as well. We continuously see the clampdown on journalism, independent media as well. How do we help people to become independent media? Nowadays, you can start a podcast in your bedroom, basically. And a lot of people are doing that. How do we empower those kinds of people? And also the right to privacy, being able to be trained on privacy and how to protect yourself online. I know there was organizations here that work in help justice defenders and their privacy, right? And security. I wish we can have more online courses that are developed. And I remember that was my challenge last time when you invited me. Let's have digital courses that anyone can go online and learn. I don't have to attend a workshop. Maybe I'm in Mandera. please do 10 sessions online that I can figure out VPN, two-factor authentication, all those things. There's so many apps, for instance, on private communication, but we only know Signal, right? What other apps exist? How can we empower people and not have to, I think, do repeated trainings that only target, let's say, this is a very closed silo. But we want everybody to be able to access these tools very well. And now, so as I was saying, so those circumvention tools, checking and verification, those are digital products, right? Digital security training, as I've said, and also being able to document abuses. One of the things that occurred to me about Albert Ochieng is that it never was meant to be a legal process. It was extrajudicial, right? Except, let's say, where he was arrested and sent to the local police station. I don't think the way they meant to deal with it was judicial in any way. Now, I immediately thought, if we had a tool, this could apply to all protesters. If we had a tool where I could immediately send an SOS, but that SOS, I'm not having to text LSK, I don't know, emergency services like, let's say, medical. It's one, but it multiplies to all the service providers, National Commission on Human Rights, prosecution, police, judiciary, that says, I've been arrested, I don't know where I'm being taken, I don't know what's going on. That in itself immediately calls for accountability. It is a transparency tool, right? It's not AI, it's not fancy. But maybe that could have saved Albert Ojwang in the 6 hours that it took to transfer him to Nairobi, right? And even after he got here, he still trusted these people were going to be taking care of him properly. And that you've seen people complaining online how they've ended up in remand, being misguided by judicial officers in the courtrooms. So an alert SOS system is not something that will take programmers 2-3 days to program, right? So let's think about how this can help us to bar the clampdown on democracy. But now when we specifically think about AI and think about the upcoming elections, can we use it to help analyze voter registration, verify how we're doing, who's in the list? So I know that there's a process where, for instance, an audit firm is given the final register to audit, and that's where they remove like dead people or I don't know, all those kind of other things. Can we use AI to see how actually that is being done? When we were in CIPIT, we were doing research on, for instance, targeted alert SMSs where, for instance, if he and I are in the same constituency, he would get a message targeting him to vote for his tribe. I would get for my tribe. How are they able to profile that? And isn't that now illegal under the Data Protection Act? We need tools to be able to monitor things like that. And it's difficult, it's surreptitious, it's still happening, right? You remember, for the first time, you've seen this thing about use and dump. For the first time, we actually have an admission on the use of throttling, which we used to study again at CIPIT, and we have reports about that around 2017, 2018 time. Gentrix will remember that. But there's finally an admission that internet is throttled. We used to use UNI probe. UNI is the Open Observatory. Basically, it's an organization. It's a worldwide organization, and I think maybe there's more now that do this. They actively monitor the internet, but they need a crowdsourcing of people, like let's say for me to give, to do a test right here and test the network. But now with AI, you can do continued monitoring, right? So we need tools like that to tell, we know there's 5G around Radisson Blu, for instance, but right now it's 2G, and you don't know why. Maybe it's because we're having this meeting. And it's, so you see, those are things that AI will be able to help us do, and basically to anonymize data, to blur faces. If, for instance, so this is the counterintelligence. If they're using AI to identify protesters and things like that, we can use it to now also anonymize ourselves. If they're using, and also use it to map the extent to which such state surveillance networks are working, right? For media integrity, for instance, there's a lot of coordinated I don't know, making hashtags trend. Those already digital tools to identify that. But now with AI, it's easy to identify when bots are being used, coordinated posting, rapid amplification. It's easy to just, those tools help you to show that there's a node, and this node, so for instance, one person, is the one who started the tweet, and all of a sudden, these people who seem to have a frequent relationship with him reposted that within 5 minutes, right? And so you start to bring in transparency of what sort of is happening. Pole pole. The other thing is algorithmic bias. So that is there. For instance, when you come to things about regionality, proportionality, how funds are distributed, how people are employed, etc. And the clamor for explainable AI, so AI that you can basically be able to explain the reasoning beyond of how you arrived at whatever decision you did, is really important. This, I guess, are more advanced tools that we are working on, but let's say in the next 5 years, they should be operational. So explainable AI, having AI auditing tools will be really important, and is something that is also being worked on. And maybe, yes, I'll stop there, give people a chance, but you get the idea. AI can be used for an offensive and a defensive. Let's think about the defensive, and let's start having projects actually develop tools or develop research to show how it's being used systematically, but also how it can be used to empower others. Thank you very much.
Let's appreciate Dr. Asante sana. I think in the last general election, you saw when KMPG did the audit and they released it to IEBC. IEBC only released 47 pages of that report. Yet from even the table of content, you could see the report is 156 pages. And when they were asked, where are the rest of the pages, that information was never received. So I believe that maybe going into the next general election, Daktari, like you've insinuated, we will be able to employ AI to just do our voter register ourselves as the people and see who is in that register. And when they talked about even weak passwords and things like that, because you can see this is at the heart of our politics. Who has access to this information? Who is this that can add people into a register and remove some? So such questions, I think, will be able to be answered by tech. And as we segue into that, Marie, by the way, you can still have your seat, you can still come here. From your research on the impact of AI on democracy in the global South countries, what opportunities and risks do you see emerging for democratic participation, and particularly in relation now to inclusion of marginalized groups, as you also just tell us on what you had prepared on the topic? Karibu sana, Mari.
Thank you. I think I'll remain seated. I think I'll just build off from what Dr. Robert has been saying. I think AI has the capacity to be used for good, and of course there are risks that come with adopting AI in various capacities. So I think I spend a lot of my time, if I'm being honest, worrying and thinking about the risks more than the positives. So I think it's good that today we are gathered to speak about both. But perhaps then I'll just start with what I think are the risks that AI is going to pose to African democracies, and in particular East African democracies. Though I think these are things that, because of the nature of our states, the shared characteristics, these are risks that are going to abound in both African countries and generally in the global South. So I think, when I think about the risks that really capable AI, and by AI I don't mean just what people think about generative AI. I think AI is adopted in many forms, and models differ. So I think about first surveillance. Today we've had almost every other panelist speaking about how states are conducting surveillance, so monitoring people, tracking people's activities either online or in protests. And I think already we've seen, even without AI, we've seen how states have gone to great extents to surveil people. And the thing that AI is going to do is it's going to give them, it's going to make surveillance much cheaper, much faster, much more extensive. So I think about, for example, online monitoring. I think about bots that monitor and suppress people engaging online. And I think the thing about surveillance is I think it's not been cheap, but I think doing it manually has been quite cheap compared to what AI is going to. Has not been so cheap, but I think AI is going to make it cheaper. So instead of a person perhaps monitoring lots and lots of present accounts online, I think AI could automate that and make it much faster and much cheaper. And I think the thing about AI is also it will enforce both now traditional methods of repression. So when you think about arrests, so it's gonna, because AI is enabling monitoring and surveillance, then surveillance enables traditional repression methods such as arrest, perhaps being murdered. I think about it in terms of that. I think about it in terms of what AI is also going to do for democratic processes such as elections. Today we've talked about elections a lot, but also think about other democratic processes that are important. Today we are celebrating Katiba Day. I think constitution making and remaking and those were really important democratic processes that involved people needing to know information about what the old constitution was about, what the new constitution is proposing to be. And I think when I think about AI-generated content, again, we talked about, I think, misinformation a lot and disinformation. Same thing as surveillance. I think AI is going to make misinformation really, you can just generate a lot of AI, fake AI content, spread it quite quickly, and spread it very widely. And then I think about the actual implications on the ground. When you think about deepfakes in terms of videos, audios, or like photos, and how they influence people's decision making. So if it was election, when people are making their votes, deciding who to vote for, if it's in the constitution, when it was yes or no, thinking about such things. And I think earlier again in the panel, Luciana talked about how the virality of misinformation. So the thing is, I'm generating fake content, perhaps disinformation, and whether I want to do it maliciously or not, I'm spreading the information, and there are not sufficient ways to counter this immediately. So traditionally, we've had news media, reliable sources such as media, or even fact-checking organizations, but their work again has tended to be quite manual, quite resource-intensive and time-consuming. And when I think about now you have fake AI-generated content that's spreading really quickly, and they're overwhelmed, and there's not enough time or enough resources to counter it. I think that muddies democratic processes, and I think even generally it muddies public discourse on online platforms such as social media. And I think we don't need to look quite far. I think there's been a lot of research monitoring and documenting how AI is influencing things like elections in Nigeria and South Africa, or supporting the coup in Burkina Faso. So I think without sufficient ways, AI-generated content is going to mean just a lot of muddying of democratic processes. Those are the two main risks I spend a lot of time worrying. But again, I think people are coming up with creative ways to use AI to support democracies. So for AI-generated content, actually, there's been a lot of suggestions. We were talking about how you fact-check fake news or false information. So I think people are suggesting using AI detection tools so that automatic fact-checking in a sense that does it really quickly. And we've seen, I think, some form of this on like X with community notes, or like how social media platforms sometimes say this is like not true. So I think developing such tools will be helpful. That's a good way to use AI. And there I have to also acknowledge the conversation that has been going on about generative AI being developed in the West, in Silicon Valley. And I think that prompts a need for homegrown tools, homegrown AI models, homegrown AI tools that I think take into account local languages, for example. So I think we've seen enough misinformation being spread in local languages for us to know that this could be a problem. So I'm willing to expect a model trained on English or like French to be quite adept at detecting misinformation, disinformation in local languages. So that's one area where I think people could be working on. I don't have technical skills. I don't have a technical background, but I think that's something people with a technical background could do really well. And I think also, just to mention, we've been talking about, I think, civic education. So I think one way to counter AI-generated content is through civic education. And this is also a good place for AI to help. I think, like we mentioned earlier as well in the earlier panel, we talked about the Finance Bill GPT. I think that was a great example of a homegrown tool that's being used to educate people. Like Sylvia talked about, it's summarizing a really dense and really long bill and informing people who otherwise would not have read it. Perhaps if they read it, they're willing to understand much of it. So I think tools that summarize law or legal processes or whatever it is, any information we need really to make informed opinions, because an informed or educated or literate population is really important for our democracy to thrive, right? So we think about AI being used, so such tools, such models, general purpose transformers really just being used to educate people. And I think something I haven't seen many people explore. So like last year again in the protest, I think we saw lots of TikToks where people are translating the bill into their native languages to help people in the rural areas or their grandmas and their grandpas. And I think that's something that AI could have done really well. I think really cutting edge models at the moment are really good at text tasks, safe to say, I think. And translation has been one area where AI is actually doing really well. I guess though on Western languages. So again, having a homegrown AI tools that can translate important documents, important information into local languages that then inform people's decision making will be really good. That's an area I think AI is very fit for. And then I think I've seen research, including by the EU, on how AI can improve voting processes. So like Dr. Robert was talking about voter registration, or really thinking about, again, duplicity, I think has been a problem with voter registers. Like if AI, that's something to do with data really, AI will be really helpful for such purposes. So counter-checking voter registers. And I think there's also some thinking behind fully automating voting. I don't know the processes behind voting much, but I think people are thinking about automating such processes. Now, as someone who worries a lot about AI, I also have to note that the cyber capabilities of AI models have been getting really good, both cyber offense and cyber defense. And I think the thing I worry about integrating AI in critical infrastructure, which I think voting systems are part of the critical infrastructure, is then that makes them vulnerable to attacks. And then suddenly what we thought will be improving a manual system is having it actually be more susceptible to attacks. Or like anyone who really wants to just mess with the voting process. I think that's something we have to think about and think about carefully, right? Yeah, I think that those are my initial thoughts about AI. So the positive uses that we may see, and I think the risk that we need to worry about.
Wow, let's appreciate Marie. Marie, thank you for those reflections. And I think in Zambia the other day, they were having also a challenge with surveillance. And just recently in Kenya, when they wanted to do the Kenya Information and Communication Amendment Bill, and it had outrageous provisions. The government could monitor what you're doing with your internet, such things. In Zambia, I was seeing them talk about how the cyber crimes agency is under the office of the president. So you can definitely see how dictators sometimes are invested in getting information from people. But thank you also for reflecting with us on the opportunities that are there. And I remember Rose Njeri being arrested the other day for that communication, for the tool that she had created on on the anti-finance bill. And now as we segue into that, James, talking now as a practitioner, as someone now who advocates for ethical AI, how do we balance innovation with sovereignty? And is there a way to build African-centered AI governance frameworks that resist the capture of democratic processes by these billionaires and by big tech? Over to you, James.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Let me do my presentation while sitting. I have a bad right leg. I did a mistake of over-celebrating not so long ago when we were still in the playing our football. So, yeah, so let me do it over here. So, yes, my name is James, but if you call me Mojes, I'll be very happy. James Oyange is in the ID. But anyway, so me, my journey into this conversation or into this background of digital innovation, AI and democracy in the Eastern African region, it comes from a lived experience. So not so long ago, I used to do a work called content moderation. And before that, I used to do a work called data annotation. So for those who would want to have a little bit of background about what those are, so content moderation is basically, we basically protect or we basically clean the social media apps that you people use. So for example, if you're on TikTok, majority of you just go there for the funny videos and the dance things, you know, people dance, throw their hands up or whatever. On Twitter, the same and everything. But behind that, there's a lot of things that are happening, you know. Onto the data annotation. I know maybe some of us would have the AI-assisted appliances, like the small vacuum cleaners that are there in your houses. I don't know if some of us here have cars that have like lane assists or have the this thing called LiDAR, right? Where your car can like self-drive for a certain, you know, a certain kilometer or a distance. So that's basically what data annotators do. And we basically help AI become AI. So these roles basically, they power the very AI systems and the digital platforms that we all rely on. I usually laugh when I hear people say that AI is a revolutionary tool, it's something that is going to change the world, but nobody really gives credit to the people who provide the data or power these things. And majority of them, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, are coming from the global south. Africa, as a region, we have a huge number of people who do this work. Kenya, we are very happy, or we are very privileged enough to house most of the 54 states. Like the workers are coming here to do these works in the different companies that are, you know, those are public and those that are also doing the work, well, they're doing the work like hidden, you know. So people in the West, like every time when Google, are we supposed to mention the, anyway, anytime these companies like come out with a new tool or something, I know there's a big phone company that is coming with a new, they're rolling out new phones in next month, I think 9th September, thereabout. And I'm very sure they'll be launching like a new AI system and it will be very revolutionary, but nobody in that audience will talk about the people who are feeding these systems or are feeding data to this platform. So for me, from that vantage point, I've seen both sides of the innovation. Obviously, the potential of technology to connect people and, you know, to amplify the democratic voices and, you know, to spread information, to have like a good, you know, feeling or a good environment online. But also, there are some of the hidden costs that are usually there when the workers are doing the work behind the scenes. I'd want you to picture your environment or a society without a first responder, right? And the first responder, I'm talking about the police, the firefighters, the army, when you're going to like a whole country. And we imagine our country without the army, or even our country without the police, our country without the doctors, our country without, you know, the firefighters. It will be complete chaos, right? Now imagine our online system or the internet without content moderators. You guys will be seeing some of the things that you wouldn't think are existing. So the duality on this, for me, I believe there's an I don't want to put it like an intended exclusion for the workers not to be heard, not to be seen. It's something that is being done with an intention of hiding the work. You know, that's why they're calling it AI. And in the picture of us, we see like, I usually love these pictures where when somebody talks about AI, they have like a picture of a computer or like a robot or something, and they usually laugh because obviously it's human, but they should put a picture of a human being over there. So the exclusion over there, it's usually very intentional, and it's coming from the big tech companies. And they're doing this because they want to ride on that wave of the technological, experience or the expansion of AI, and they hide the workers. And in them doing that, they know very well that this work obviously is usually very challenging, and hiding the fact that it's being done by human beings usually comes to their benefit. So, and it's obviously it's if you do not want, for example, the workers to talk more about the work that they're doing, it also hinders on the democratic right of them to try and share or to speak out about the issues that are affecting them. Because when those who build and sustain these digital systems have no voice, technology usually risks or technology usually vires off to serve the only people who are doing this for profit. And unfortunately, most of these companies, that's how they do their things, and basically that's why like my advocacy usually focuses on linking ethical AI, data and digital rights to whatever we are doing. Because if, for example, East Africa is to lead in innovation, it must also lead like in ensuring technological projects are done with dignity and the privacy that they deserve, and the freedom and thereabouts that make sure that these systems have like a democratic future that the workers are building, basically. So to maybe your question, for me, I believe like for us to balance AI innovation with human rights, in the Eastern Africa region, or even in Sub-Saharan or even in the African region, it comes down to basically three things. And me, I've narrowed it down to rights, transparency, and accountability. So if you look at rights, I believe or I view AI should be built with human rights by design. Innovation must not justify mass surveilling. You should not come with something new in like a Trojan horse for you to be surveilling people. In Kenya, we had the WorldCoin craze. And the WorldCoin, we had it, for those who are very keen, this is something that has been there for a very long time. It's only because they wanted to now start sending money, like doing their first drop, is where now people started now rushing to go and give out their personal data. But it's something that has been there. If you've been going to the malls, people are telling you, hey, can you come and do this? They were like introducing you to these things. So most of these companies, if you look at how they are coming or how they package themselves, they come as a Trojan horse. They talk about this new thing and how they're going to, it's going to be financially beneficial to you, and it's life-changing. But in the background, a lot of it comes at the detriment of your own personal data. If you look at the iris scans, that's, I don't know, like that's like in the upper, the upper role of like the some of the serious data that somebody has, biometrics. It's a really serious data for one to give out, without knowing anything they're doing. And then transparency. Citizens deserve transparency on how their data is used and how, like, the decisions are made. Back to the work that we do. There's some work that deals with data annotation, where you are being given like a work. Let's say you are being tasked to do annotation, right? And this annotation work, you're being told to take photos of your hands, take photos of yourself when you're smiling, when you are frowning, go take a photo of your baby when they're sleeping on the baby cot, and then they go tell you, take a photo of an elderly person from the ages of 70 to 100, so you have to travel to your country to look for an old person, you know. And you know you're doing these things because you're chasing that $50. You're chasing that whatever, you know. But at the hindsight, there's no transparency. The company or the work that you're doing, they do not want to tell you how this thing is being used to train the AI systems that are outside there. So transparency is something that also needs to be there, and accountability. For me, I think accountability must be clear, and it must come from the government and the tech companies, basically. Unfortunately, I don't know if there's a government official over here. If you are there, then it's very good. The government, for me, I believe it's working in cahoots with the tech companies in trying to, I'd say, kufinya. So maybe somebody translate to dumb down in our fight for recognition and for our fight for our rights. Right now we have a bill, a very draconian bill that was it passed in Senate, so I think it's coming to the National Assembly, and it's on the business something. I know there's a lot of lawyers over here, so I'm doing an injustice, but anyway, it's a bill that is supposed to give immunity to the tech companies. If they're working over here, they cannot be taken to court. That's just like a summary of it. So if, for example, right now there's a petition, an active petition since 2022 for Meta. So if this bill goes through, it means Meta will not be held liable for anything that they do in this country, you know. Imagine such a bill passes. What does that show, or what does that reflect to the people who are working? And unfortunately, the proposer, or the person who forwarded this bill to the Senate, is the leader of majority. And the leader of majority of the Senate, I mean, it's a close buddy to the guy in the house in the hill, you know. So it's just coming from there. And if you see these things happening, and then you go on Twitter, you find that some of these tech companies, their PR people or their HR or their managers are going to the house at the hill and making some photo ops with that guy over there. It's making even you start worrying. When he started this fight, it was only us and the tech companies. Now the government is involved, the outsourcing companies are involved, so it's usually becoming a little bit difficult, and that's why for me accountability needs to come from all the sectors. People need to be accountable. The tech companies, unfortunately, most of the workers do not know what they're getting themselves into. I've talked about content moderation and how it's a very challenging job. But people, if you narrow it down to the contracts of some of the people who are doing this content moderation job, their contracts are reading customer service representatives. You only know that you're going to do this work as a content moderator when you're doing your training and when now you're going live, So it's a crazy environment, and that's why for me accountability needs to come from the tech companies and the government. They should come together to help us, help them to make this ecosystem work for the better good of everyone. I mean, most of the countries are going into an election year, and us, obviously, it's 2027, and we expect a lot of fake news and false information that will be spread online. I believe AI can help, but it's usually not good in doing that job, and that's where now the content moderators and annotators usually come through. So these things, if we work together and try to thrash it out, it would be good instead of going against one another. And yeah, I think that's I'll leave it there, and then we continue.
Thank you, Moses. Moses, thank you for reflecting on us on lived experiences, and thank you for the three-prong approach on rights, transparency, and accountability. As you are talking about imagining having no responders, I think those of you that know the works of Thomas Hobbes, he once mentioned that before the social contract theory, life was short, nasty, and brutish. And I think now we are going into another dispensation where AI we might need a new social contract theory to just help us govern those things. And as you are reflecting on the Business Law Amendment Bill of 2024, actually, when I saw people that now work behind the scenes trying to present their memo to Senate and Senate turning them away, it was quite unfortunate. So thank you for that. I want to open this to the floor. Questions from the floor are now most welcome. Yes, there's one there. Thank you, Ndolo. Any other person that has a question? There's another one on that table.
Mine is more of a comment than it is a question to Moses. What's happening is under the old companies law and under the Income Tax Act and under the data protection laws, there was a gap somewhere in that a company may not necessarily register with the company's registry, but may start operating, may even start paying tax, and may be registered by the ODPC. So what WorldCoin did was to expose this gap between the various registries, that some people would be able to operate, run a business without necessarily registering either as foreign companies or local entities at BRS. And then it became an issue on how now to enforce if they don't have constituting documents locally, and then their global presence is also a bit hard to tackle. So what now they're trying to do, albeit in a funny way that government usually operates, is to streamline your entry into the market, such that if you enter, you start at companies registry, regularize that, move to ODPC, move to KRA and all that, so that they're able to track your movement and operations within the country. So that's what they're working backwards to try and regularize. Not to make sure that you don't have any sort of physical and legal presence in the country.
Thank you.
Hi. Mine is more reflections and more reflections and more commentary. When I reflect on blockchain technology, I'm thinking about how with blockchain there's a digital token where it's decentralized. So I see amendments to blockchains or tokens or artificial intelligence being decentralized, where we all come together as a block or as a continent and creating the frameworks for artificial intelligence and how we would wish to be governed, or how we wish our governance, our accountability, and all these pillars that you mentioned, how we should be overlooked as a society. And I'm just thinking about how within a certain token, there's a 14-day period in which if one was to make an amendment to the blockchain, it would need a consensus of 67%, and then 14 days within that 67% for an amendment to be taken. So if we can have such amendments where we could say, okay, if we can come together as the African Union, and we decide then 67% of us have now agreed that this is how we should be governed, or this is how an amendment should be taken forward, and 14 days within that, then I think that we can have a unification in terms of how we should be using artificial intelligence, because in as much as we should be moving fast, and we should be moving fast as a continent, I think moving fast should not be coming at the detriment and consequences of the people. So now I'm thinking about Switzerland. Switzerland has now given their rights of their body. You know, a comment was made about their hands, and Home Affairs needs you in South Africa, needs you to scan your whole face. If you want to get back into your Meta, your Facebook, you need to scan your face. Someone needs to look at that. So who does that sit with? The multilateral corporations, what do they do with this data? So then it comes to then who owns those rights to your person. So juristic personality needs to always sit within the person before it sits in the state, before it sits in a multinational organization. I had this, my last comment was for the first panel, but I think it also bridges well into this panel, in that we need to have, as I've said, decentralized platforms. But when I think about, we have these multilaterals like Meta having WhatsApp. I know in Russia now they're having a situation where they do not want the West to have ownership over the Russians' data. So now the West has come up with their own platform, just as China has with WeChat. But in saying that, in as much as that should be taken forward, we should not rely on the state protecting us as citizens. We should have these platforms where we can choose who do we trust, so that if we do not trust the multilateral organization, then we have the state to fall back on. And then it is for the states or the multilateral organization to then build up their capacity to, in order to keep, to hold, to safeguard the people. And if you do not safeguard the people, there's always going to be another platform. And that other platform then should be one which we have, as I've said, a decentralized place where we have nodes, where we have 14-day amendment periods, where if we do not agree, one person can pull out and then we need to reconstruct how we wish to be governed, whether it's artificial intelligence or social media. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other insight, comment, question? Jaika?
Thank you, Tuku, and thank you for thank you to the panelists. My question is directed to Dr. Mudhuri. Based on the issues that are ongoing, not only in Kenya, but mostly in our African countries, the issue of surveillance. Should we trust AI with our personal data? I think that's a democratic question. Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Going once, twice. Now back to our panelists. Maybe Dr. Mudhuri, as you answer that question, and then Marie and Mojes, as also, you just give final remarks and final thoughts as we close the panel. Karibuni sana.
Thank you very much, Jaika, for that question. And I would tailor even to a little bit of the comment that you made about, facial recognition. So it's quite a big concern, especially with surveillance and social control. So yes, we're aware, as our panelists really elaborated on how it's being used in a harmful way. But I think the opportunity is in developing this privacy, using AI for privacy-enhancing technologies, as I was saying, about blurring faces, being able to anonymize data, and also being able to analyze and map the extent of surveillance networks. In a very bold move, Denmark is currently considering issuing copyright to people's faces. And why is that important? It's because now if someone does a deep fake of you, you'll be able to enforce your rights, including compensation, etc. Right now, there's minimal you can do. I think AI has a role there in being able to quickly identify, for instance, that this is a deep fake, algorithmically, right? I had a very interesting case last year in Makadara where it came down to processing photos. I learned a lot, processing photos of essentially what was a crime scene. And I learned that, for instance, if I send you a photo from my phone, if I take a photo with my phone, there's a lot of information encoded there. But if I send it to you on WhatsApp, the compression algorithm, to make it smaller and easy to move around, removes a lot of that information. And the lady that I was representing was smart to take those photos, but I had literally had to go trace that phone and find a way to remove those images in a way that protected that information. And that's when now I learned about how, there's things like EXIF. Sorry? Yeah, so the metadata. So, but there's different versions of this. Like there's EXIF data. There's another one I've forgotten that helps to encode. And the fact in question there was, when did this crime happen, right? And essentially what had happened is she had been charged on the same fact pattern for which she had reported a case. So 2 months down the line, she was in prison for something that she had complained about, right? So it came down to that EXIF data that showed that this happened on 20th of September 2023 and not 15th of December 2023. So you see, this is how we need to be able to extract such information. And now when you put it, and you're right, if you put it on a blockchain, you'll be able to even store it in a more, let's say, perpetual way, where you can prove provenance. Provenance is being able to prove in evidence, being able to demonstrate the originality and the source of information, for instance. So that would be interesting to see how Denmark goes with that way of giving people the image rights. But also, I think we should, and the idea of even the ability of taking photos here, and I think those rights still are being tested. If you did put a notice there and I didn't see it, or if you put, let's say, a vague, let's say, what do you call it, like a release form, all those things I think need to be tested. But I think democratically speaking, more and more we need to recognize people's rights to their image. I studied it when it was just image rights. Now, when it comes to deepfakes, it's getting to the point where we will need to very quickly determine whether this has been altered or not, and what to do with that information. And technologies will help for sure. And as someone mentioned, WorldCoin brought out all of these things. WorldCoin was fascinating. I tried to study that thing 2 years ago because it combined privacy, blockchain technology, World ID, and it was even improving the technology from where the iris scan used to be compressed into a code. But now, the challenge, the technical challenge with WorldCoin is that they needed to scale that technology to give you a unique ID to the point of 1 billion, right? And to the point of 1 billion is basically essentially everyone in the world could get a unique identifier. And why he was raising the issue about how dangerous it is once you lose that information, you can't redo it. You know, the reason actually they disturb us with taking fingerprints every time, either at the police station or the airport, is because your fingerprints evolve. If you get a cut now, you will not have the same fingerprint once your finger heals, you know? So it's a less credible source of information, and that's why we have to keep replicating them. But when you get into those other more permanent types of representation, like iris scans, DNA, etc., it's very dangerous how that information can, needs to be protected. So, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Moses.
Yeah, so for me, I think my closing remarks I'll still stick to how I see AI can amplify the voices of everyone. So for me, I think it needs to be a joint effort or something like that. And I'm speaking from somebody who has worked, or my journey in content moderation, data annotation. So for me, I see how AI can amplify the voices, but also how it can silence or exclude the same voices if it's left unchecked, the workers who sustain the systems that we're talking about, the citizens whose data fuels them, and if you look at also the communities that we live in, the communities who live within us, might suffer the consequences that will come, and all must be part of shaping the digital future. And I believe if East Africa, I don't know if should I narrow it down to East Africa or broaden it to Africa? If Africa, East Africa, if we want to take the lead, in AI technology and making sure the systems are working, I think we need to show that that the innovation we're talking about really works. We're the ones who are supposed to start with that discussion. We should not dumb down voices or gatekeep, something like that. We should not look at this aspect as for profit, you know. Let's leave that to the global north, you know. For us, we need to have our own systems. I believe we're talking about how, you know, we can use like the AI systems to help us translate the different vernacular languages that we have. It needs to come from us. We should not wait until, you know, an AI policy, whatever, comes from Silicon Valley, and then us, our work is just to adapt or to have like a Kenyan version. We really need to have our own. Because let me tell you for a fact, Kenya, we're in a very good position. Everyone, I used to think the wording of Silicon Savannah was a fallacy, but after interacting with a lot and being obviously inside, I can see like Kenya being the true Silicon Savannah. So we're in a very good position. It's us who can help shape and influence how we can have like an AI strategy and the innovation that comes with everything that will come from this. Will you do it? Let's wait and see.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah.
Marie?
I think my closing remarks will be that I think as pertains democracy, it's clear that the people we expect to help the government also pose a risk to our own rights. So I think, however it is you can get involved as civil society, as academics, as researchers, I think you need to take the steps to get engaged. And I think one of the attendees mentioned, I think if we could unite as Africans, not to borrow entirely from what the EU has done, but the EU already has a legislation on AI covering a variety of risks and how they're supposed to respond and what developers are supposed to do. I think, and we have enough evidence, I think, of regional integration within Africa yielding certain positive results. So I think that's one step we can take to unite as African countries, to think about what we want AI to do for us, how we want it to serve us, and how to respond to the risks. But I think also, call, at least highlight, I think there are a lot of international efforts to govern AI as well. However it is, I think African civil societies can get involved. I think that might be helpful, especially I think because most of these initiatives have lacked African voices and Global South voices. So I think if you can get involved, for example, with the UN is releasing guiding principles on business and human rights and AI. If you could get involved in such initiatives, I think that would be helpful. So, and I guess one last thing, like based on what I said about governments posing a risk with respect to how they use AI, I think it will be good to monitor public procurement of AI. I think, especially for things like smart city technologies, facial recognition, I think monitoring how they procure, what they intend to use such AI for, I think that's something that civil society organizations can monitor and I think highlight that will be helpful. So I think for everyone to just take the steps they think they can, to react.
Thank you so much, Marie. Dr. Mudhuri, I don't know if you had given your closing remark or you have something. Are you okay?
No, it's fine. Like, I just to reiterate that I think it's well and good to say, we need to be involved or that we need to. I think we need to claim our space. So we need to have more developers of local data sets. That's really, really important. The project I want to work on right now is about explainable AI, for instance. Like, you've seen this, especially, it's become a bigger issue in protests. People are arrested and one magistrate is giving 10,000 and another 50,000. And we don't have, and systematically, we've never had any explanation. Even as we claim explainable AI, they don't explain how they arrive at this figures. So I'm thinking of how to develop an algorithm that can show, based on mitigating and aggravating factors and all of that, how you arrived. We should be able to assess you on how you arrived at your decision, right? And that's why I'm saying, right now we have a lot of self-reporting by government agencies, but who's checking them and how do we check that the reports that they issue actually make sense? So that's one of the areas I think I want to work on because I work mostly in access to justice. So let's get more involved with the actual technologies. I think what I've seen is sort of like a bias for international organizations. When they come here, they want to try to move us towards governance and talks like that, but they do not want to fund local data sets. They do not want to talk about how they're developing this and transfer of, what do you call it? Transfer of technology, right? So that we can do it ourselves because we have the competence. So I think we have to find ways to bootstrap that because essentially they don't want to do it. And currently there's an arms race between China and the US on basically who's going to get to, is it general intelligence or whatever that is. So I think let's get more practical and pragmatic, looking for empirical evidence, whichever way. Even if you're not a technical researcher, you can be involved still in empirical evidence to test out the assumptions and hypotheses that you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mudhuri. Let's appreciate the panel. From arms race to AI races, you can imagine. That's where we are. To our panelists, thank you, Dr. Mudhuri and Marie and James, for helping us peel back the layers on a topic that is usually very difficult. So help me appreciate the panel once again. And to you, our audience, thank you for leaning into this difficult and very complex conversation. So appreciate yourselves. And if there is one big takeaway that we need to take away from this is that AI by itself will not destroy or save our democracies. What will matter is who controls them, for what purpose, and in whose interest. So our task as Africans and as East Africans and as Kenyans is to ensure that digital innovation does not become a new instrument of domination, whether by states or oligarchs or corporations, but rather they remain more committed to making sure that the digital age and democracy remain of the people, by the people, and for the people. Thank you so much.